Continuing forward. Are you aware of the natural disasters that may occur in any relocation area that you plan or intend or could find yourself and your family or your unit and friends in? Do you know of prior flooding areas of your reposition or bug out locations? You need to know this, people. All right, I got questions from several people. Will they be safe in caves? You could be. But most likely, and this depends on your ability to manage this resource if you choose caves. You will require actual survival skills to sustain life no matter where you're at. And don't fool yourself into false sense of security because you found caves or you know of a cave few people know. If you do, I hope it works for you. But just remember, the feds have an extensive database, and they've been gathering this for over 30 years, and it's intensified the past 10 years. They've used the U.S. Geological Survey, and most states have database of the caves. Not all of them, let's just say most of them, not all. And don't be naive in thinking that any location is 100% safe, foolproof, and no one will ever find you. If you do choose one of these, I hope you remain safe, healthy, and out of danger. Indications. We're moving on to another topic. You may want, if you see this in your around cities or your community, building up as a possible mobilization or deployment, the military, the DOJ, and the other Fed agencies possess these operations. Biological chemical response units and equipment. You might want to look that up while you still have time, people. Biological chemical response units and equipment. That would clue me if I happened to drive close to the major U.S. city, which is not on top of me, thank goodness, but if I saw that in strategic places, I would want to know more about what is it doing there. Nuclear response units and equipment. You need to look this up from the Department of Defense, Department of Justice, and the appropriate Fed agencies and UN, United Nations response teams as well. Private contractors involved in this. PMC is a private military contractor. If you observe military tanks, armor equipment, and carriers encircled a city with the armament or the cannons facing away from the city. In other words, if the ass of the tanks is facing toward the city and the armament and the cannons are facing away from the city and they appear to be hunkered down and they have pulled the choppers and the fixed wing craft back and the personnel, that's an indication you may be facing a micro nuke, biological weapons, or chemical attack. That is not good, people. Don't let it scare the hell out of you, but you can't be prepared for everything that you could be hit with. But if you're in a major city, these are things I would want to know, so I wouldn't be blind to the possibility of that kind of destruction. They would not do that, of course, taking consideration PSYOPs, but also taking the fact if they put that kind of equipment, personnel, manpower out there, there's going to be a reason for it. Now, if you remain fixed position, you're going to require fortification. And you can't stop all threats. I can't stop an Abrams tank, and hell, a Bradley could come through the side of the structure. I'm not trying to stop that. I'm trying to keep violent civilians and small squads off of me long enough to respond or get to a fallback safety zone. Determine your primary and secondary threats. I'm not going to do that. I don't know you. I don't have time to sit here and engage in that. This is what you're supposed to do as head of the household, head of your unit, or you want to have a chance to protect yourself and your family or evade. Have you considered doing a 360-degree walk around where you're at or where you intend on being during these crises and partial or full collapse in the United States, and should it become violent? Have you walked around? You could even take your camera for yourself and don't upload it on the internet and make it public. This would be if I walked around several times on a grid and a perimeter and sectors. And if you could learn better taking your own camera, making a personal video for yourself, not on the internet, not be showing it to everybody, but sitting down for a few hours and making notes and looking at it from the eyes of violent civilians, violent marauders, violent security forces. Where are your strengths and weaknesses where you plan on being during the crisis and the collapse? How would you approach your unit if you were going to be violent and aggressive, and then you can come up with your own response plans? You determine for yourself. And then you assess it. How would you defend it from these possible threats? And I realize fortification can be expensive. It's a given. It's not. This is a no-brainer. Doors and windows are targets. I'm addressed that here. I have polycarbonate sheets, 26 inches wide, 8 foot, and I will begin cutting them probably next month for the appropriate windows and doors. I just want to buy time. That's what I'm trying to buy. I've seen this happen, and most of us are not extremely wealthy to begin with, and even if you were, you can still be compromised no matter how much money and how much materials you put into it. I want to buy time to protect my family and get them out of this. Now, I'm asked repeatedly, who is the enemy? Well, know your enemies because they know you. And if they don't, they will learn to know you. To begin with, no one has to be paranoid or obsessive about this topic. I haven't ever stood around and looked over my shoulders, where's the enemy? Hear, see, and sort for yourself. What may be my enemies may not be your enemies. What may be your enemies someone else may not have to confront. It's your responsibility as an adult to identify the sustainable threats, but if you start overreacting to everything, you're going to contaminate your perceptions, observations, conclusions, and you're going to discredit yourself. Now is the time to address this if that's an issue for anyone. Now, this is going to get people killed if they don't get this out of their head. If you think the only enemy is armed security uniformed forces, military or police, you're going to get killed most likely. They are a primary threat. Oh, and their technology, they're very dangerous. But they're not the only enemy. And let me make it clear so it's not taken out of context by any jackasses. The military and the law enforcement, foreign troops and mercenaries and their extensive technology is not your only primary enemy. If you think it is, you will get your feelings hurt and probably killed in the process at some point. There are 300 million Americans. How many do you actually think are not prepared? How many people don't take responsibility for themselves now? How many people are prone to violence now? How many people do you think are going to become violent? The violent civilian population that will turn on each other internally is far greater than all the soldiers, all the police officers, the foreign troops, and the mercenaries combined. Much greater numbers from violent citizens and marauders. And they will find each other, and they will come. They will come. The gangs in the cities are expected to become a very violent force to deal with. They may become bad enough in the cities, the feds may pull a perimeter back and let them fight it among themselves or yourselves with them. Now, during warfare combat wounds are not typically the highest casualty of death. That's a myth. Starvation is one of the top causes of death in war. Open violence and open war. Starvation and internal violence are equal or greater than combat wounds. Now, of course, if they drop nukes or bioweapons and chem, that's going to run the numbers up high, but you still are going to face starvation and internal violence. And guess what one of the third one is? Dysentery. Look up dysentery. Dysentery will kill you at a high rate. It's not an illness, it's a disease. This is one of the primary reasons the Russians fled and evacuated and stopped their war with Afghanistan in the late 1980s. Dysentery is dangerous. Some of you have a medical background, you know what this is. Dysentery is something you don't want to play with. That is an enemy. Internal violence is an enemy. And starvation can be an enemy if you don't have access to food. Bacteria and virus can become your enemy. Exposure to the elements such as extreme heat or cold can become an enemy. The climate can become a hostile force against you. Self-destructive behaviors, you